Hey y'all, I'm Teresa,
And Mark,
and we're your hosts for
Tell Me That Story.
where we tell you true stories of real life happenings.
So stick around, because you never know what you might hear.
Well, y'all, we are so glad to have you with us today. We were just talking a little earlier today about telling some stories actually that happened in church that we've witnessed ourselves, and some, I think you may have one that we were talking about that somebody told you about.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me a story that I'm going to share. If you grew up in small churches like we did, you're going to see funny stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Now, in a big church where there's so many people, you're probably going to miss something. But in those little small churches, you see everything. And
Yeah.
I've seen some really, really funny stuff in church.
And so we used to travel and sing some, and so there were some things that happened when we traveled and sang, but there were some that just as we were growing up. And
Yeah. When I was growing up, we had a pastor that was, he was a lifelong family friend, and he was just a great man. He was my pastor for years, and he was a fireball. He was one of those snorting, spitting preachers.
yeah, that snorting, stomping, spitting.
Yeah, he was old school preacher. He
Yes.
wasn't like these today that hang on to the pulpit like they're scared it's going to run away.
It was exciting, huh?
Yeah, it was exciting. Anyway, he was up there preaching one day, and I mean, he was just getting with it. And all of a sudden, his top plate, his dentures flew out of his mouth. They hit the pulpit and bounced off the pulpit and hit the communion table and bounced onto the hardwood floor and slid on the hardwood floor. Well, by the time they got through sliding, he was down there. He just picked them up, put them in his mouth, and kept right on going and never missed a beat.
That's too funny.
He should have just dismissed because he was done at that point.
Was
Everybody
done.
was done. Yeah. Yeah, that was funny. I've seen so many funny things, so many memorable things from when I was when he was my pastor. I remember our old church, we didn't have air conditioning back when I was a kid, and they would raise all the windows. And there was a big field out beside the church, and a lot of times there'd be turkeys in that field.
Yeah, and you're
every man in there was going to stop and look out and watch the turkeys, and we were in there one day and all these turkeys came out in the field. And of course, everybody was just looking out the window, looking at the turkeys, and he just stopped and he just got quiet for a minute. Everybody looked at him. He said, "Y'all go ahead and look at the turkeys. And when y'all get done, I'll start preaching again."
There you go.
So, of course, everybody stopped looking at the turkeys then, but yeah, he was funny. He was funny.
At that same church, he wasn't the pastor then because it was several years later. But I remember, do you remember your dad who was there and his phone,
yes.
His cell phone went off?
Yeah.
And it started playing Bad to the Bone.
Well, the pastor was preaching about Samson, I think. It was pretty sure it was Samson. And when he said something about Samson, my dad's phone started playing Bad to the Bone. And the pastor just laughed. He said, "Yep, Samson was bad to the bone."
Yeah.
And of course, Daddy, he was old. He was fiddling, trying to figure out how to turn it off. And it just kept on and on and on and on. He finally figured out how to turn it off.
That's funny. Your dad was such a funny guy anyway. And
yeah. He made a big joke out of it.
I know. He ended up getting a kick out of it. Everybody got a kick out of that. So
it was funny.
It's so funny.
I remember one time we were singing at a church. I don't want to say where it was at, but anyway, it was in South Mississippi, down close to the Gulf Coast. And we had been there a couple of times, and it seemed like every time we went there, something crazy would happen.
I know what church you're talking about, and you were so right.
Yeah.
You were so right. I mean, it was really close down the road to
a mental hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah. I wasn't going to go there, but yeah, it was right down the road from a mental hospital. And I think sometimes they would let some of the patients out on Sunday to come to church, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And I'm not making fun of them, but the funny things happen.
Yeah. It made for an entertaining service for sure.
It did make for an entertainer. I can't even talk.
But anyway, we're up on the stage singing this particular day, and this church.
Let's back up. This particular day, we had set up our table. We were in the process of getting our table set up and everything. And this person comes along, and I had my CDs, and I think we had some candles and stuff that we were selling at that time to help with funds and all that. And this guy comes up and he ends up, what's this? And he grabs the CDs and he's opening it like that, and the CD just flies out everywhere. And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh my,
tears the paper off of it.
here's it. I mean, it was just like, and I'm like, you can have that.
Yeah, you can have
You can have that. And so, and so then there was some other stuff that happened.
Well, that was the same guy
It was.
that had the sweatpants on and had his boxer shorts pulled up over his sweatpants.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was very strange looking, and
I thought, nah, those are supposed to be under the sweatpants,
right.
if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, we were up there and we were singing. We went through the whole singing and got to the last song. We were doing a fast song.
Yes.
And when we started the fast song, everybody in the church got up and was clapping along with the song. And I'm watching this guy, and he's dancing, and I don't think y'all saw it, but I was focused on him because he had my attention. And Michael was running sound for us. He was at the back running sound. He was watching too. He saw it because I looked back there and he was laughing. Well, this guy was standing there, and all of a sudden he bent down and he disappeared behind the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came back up, he had his boxer shorts in his hand, and
Yeah.
he started waving them over his head like a lasso.
Yeah.
And I was done.
Yeah, it was over.
I mean, it was over for me.
Yeah.
Did y'all not? I don't remember if y'all saw it or not.
Yes. We didn't see him leaning down. But yeah, it was something else. Yeah.
At that same church, another time we were there. So this church, when you walk down the center aisle, when you get to the back wall, there's a door.
Right.
And it leads into a nursery. And we're up on the stage and we're singing, and all of a sudden the nursery door swings open, and here comes a baby, naked as the day he was born, not even any socks on.
No, I think he was old enough that,
he was a toddler.
Right.
He was old enough to run from his mama because he came running straight down the aisle, straight toward us with his mama right behind him. And he was just laughing. He was so having a ball.
I'm telling you. And so then it was over.
Yeah, we were done with that song. Yeah, we couldn't get it back together after that, I don't think.
It was hard. It's just, it's funny times like that. I mean, you just might as well laugh. And
yeah, I remember when we were, not long after we were married, we were going to a little church out in the woods, and this lady went to the restroom, bless her heart. She went to the restroom, and when she came back in, you had to go out the back door to go to the restroom. When she came back in, she was sitting close to the front.
Right.
So she had to walk down the aisle in front of everybody, and she had her skirt tucked in the top of her pantyhose.
Yep, absolutely.
And just
paraded
shining everybody.
Right down the front of that. And it was a long way to where her seat was. I remember that. It was a long way down there.
Yeah, bless her heart. It's sad, but it's funny too.
Yeah. And that service, we had actually kept your cousin's pretty new baby. I think they just kind of needed a break or something, and we were newly married, and so I had the baby in my arms and stuff, and so we were awake all night, but we went on to the service, and then that lady comes. So it wasn't like, I could try to get her attention or anything like that. Nobody did. Nobody tried to get her attention.
Yeah.
I mean, she walked right on down to the front. It was very entertaining but embarrassing at the same time. As Lizzie says, I had secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah. So tell about Brother Stan, about the man raising his hand.
Oh, okay. Well, it was that same church, but it was
same
before
church.
That.
It was during a revival.
It was during revival, and it was before that. And let's see, we were newly married then, and so there was this evangelist, and his name was Brother Stanley Owensby, and he played a electric guitar. I'm telling you what, he could play that guitar.
Yeah.
And he was one of those fireballs too, and the church would pack out whenever everybody knew that he was coming.
Oh yeah.
And so I remember that we were all, a bunch of us were down front. He had given some kind of an invitation or whatever, and we were all down front and sat over there. And he was kind of going along and he was praying for people. And he may say, if they didn't have their hands raised, he'd say, raise your hands, raise your hands, brother, raise your hands. So he comes to this pretty elderly man and he's going to pray for him. He's like, raise your hands. And the man didn't. And so he just reached and got his hands, his by the wrist, like, and he was going to pull his hands up like that. And when he did, that man's pants hit the floor.
All the way to his ankles.
They just pulled up around his ankles, and it was over. It was over. We just might as well dismissed at that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it was over. Were you there that day?
Yes, I was there. I remember it. It was funny. That's just to, wear a belt when you go to church, or suspenders, but wear something to keep your pants up. The guy was holding his pants.
Yeah.
I guess Brother Stan didn't realize it. When he let go of them, they went to the floor.
He didn't know. It was so funny. I don't even know if Brother Stan even realized it when it happened, because he wasn't looking down.
Well, at that moment, he was more focused on other things. He wasn't worried about that.
Right. And so, but that was so funny. Do you remember the time that we were up singing and we were almost finished and the back doors swung open and we were singing a fast song?
Yes. I remember that well.
There was a guy named Keith
Rutland.
Yeah.
He was a good friend of ours, and he sang with another group that sang there that same day.
Yeah, but it was their church.
It was his church, yeah. Look, this guy, if you know Keith Rutland, you know he's a nut.
Keith,
if you're watching, man, I love you, but you're crazy.
We're going to tell a story on you, Keith.
So we're up there singing, and it's a fast song.
Mm-hmm.
And this church had double wooden doors, and it had a foyer that had glass doors. Well, Keith had gone out the wooden doors, and they'd closed behind him. Mm-hmm. Well, when somebody opened the glass door, the suction opened the wooden doors. And when the wooden doors opened, Keith was in the foyer and he was dancing. I'm talking about he was cutting a rug. I don't know what he was thinking. He was in there all by himself, just dancing, having him a good time.
Having a good time. I mean, he was having a good time out there in the foyer of the church. I can't remember the name of the church, but I do remember that.
I remember it was in
it was so funny.
It was in Monticello. That's all I can remember.
Yeah, in Monticello, Mississippi.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, we had some good times and saw some funny things. I had a friend that told me a story.
Okay.
This was I had a friend that I worked with. He was a pastor. And he had a and I confirmed this with one of his church members, so it wasn't just a story, it was true.
Mm-hmm.
He had a stomach virus. And he didn't have anybody to fill in for him. So he said, I had to go preach sick. And he was bad sick. If you've had a stomach virus, you know what it's like. And
bless his heart, he came on anyway.
He came on anyway, and he was up there trying to preach. And all of a sudden it hit him. And he's like, y'all gonna have to excuse me for a minute. I'll be right back. So he goes to the bathroom. And when he comes out, everybody's just laughing. The church, it just fell apart. And he looked down at his deacon like, what's wrong? His deacon pointed, and his lapel mic was still on, and he had been in the bathroom. And he just said, y'all are dismissed, and turned around and left, and just, he was through.
Yeah. He was over. It was over.
It was over.
There was no
recovering from that. Yeah. No. No, he told that story, and I thought, man, that's kind of far-fetched. But then I talked to a guy that goes to a church. He said, absolutely, it happened.
Oh,
it happened.
Oh, Lord. I remember standing up there at a church. We were singing at a church down the road from our house. When we were living in Mississippi, we would go to that church, and there would be a horsefly. There was horseflies so much. It seemed like during that time, I think it was one of the first places that we had ever went. And I remember you talking about, y'all, if that horsefly gets on Teresa, y'all are going to see a show, because I'm so scared of horseflies. And, since we've moved to Tennessee, I have seen one horsefly, and it was this week.
I
And we've
saw
been
one a
here two
few weeks ago,
years.
and it was a giant. They
Yeah.
don't have many, but the ones they have are huge.
Yes, they do. And we've been here 2 years, and I've seen one. But I'm telling you, down there where we're from,
Oh, they're everywhere.
they were everywhere, and I was so scared of them. And I remember you was telling them.
I said, if y'all want to see somebody shout, you let that horsefly get on my wife.
That's
She'll
right.
show you. She'll show you how to shout.
She'll give you. Hey, you remember? I don't think that I'm trying to think if we were married or if we were still if just engaged. But my daddy was singing in a group, and you know how you go and they call it having dinner on the grounds,
Yeah,
and sometimes the food was good, and sometimes it was like you pick around on it, and then you go down to Wendy's when you
yeah.
get through.
You don't get a big mouthful of it. You test it very easily
Yeah,
before you dive into it. Yeah.
that's right.
I remember this church. This is a church we were talking about on another podcast where everybody wanted to hug you. It was the hugging
It
church.
was that church.
It
And
was.
and and I don't mind, a hug, but this was like extremely awkward and everybody in the place wanted to hug you and it was very awkward.
Yeah, it was like overdoing it.
Overkill.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you want to like keep your distance.
Yeah. The if it's the story I'm thinking
It
about,
is. It is.
the bass player, your dad's group, the bass player,
Yeah, the
um,
bass guitar player.
yeah, he was real shy anyway.
Yeah.
He would go up there and he'd play on the stage, but he didn't say anything. You know,
Yeah.
didn't ask him to speak because he wasn't going to.
Mm-mm.
And he would turn just so red when everybody,
Even if they introduced him, he
yeah,
would turn
when they
blood red.
introduced him, he turned blood red. Well, after church, they had lunch.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget this. It was so funny. If it would have happened to anybody else, it wouldn't have been as funny. But happening to him, it was just absolutely hilarious. They had these thin, cheap styrofoam paper plates.
Mm-hmm.
Those really, really thin ones. You know, the ones you get the big stack of for $1. And he had piled it up with banana pudding. And I remember I had banana pudding too, and it was terrible. I don't know who made that banana pudding, but it was bad. And he had it on one, he didn't have it in the middle of his plate. It was kind of to the side. And he said, man, I can't eat this. I got to get rid of this. So he walked over to the trash can and there was a pew sitting there and there was a purse sitting on that pew right beside the trash can. And it
Yeah.
was unzipped and it was open just like this.
Yes.
And he went to put that plate in the garbage can and the plate broke and every bit of that banana pudding went right in that lady's purse.
Oh my gosh, I know.
It was a wad like this and it went plop right down in her purse. And he looked up and his face turned red and he said, what do I do? He said, should I reach in there and get it? I said, no. I said, that woman see you reaching in her purse. I said, you'd be in trouble. I said, just throw your plate away. Walk away. That's what he did. He just walked away. I can't imagine what that woman was thinking when she came back and found her purse full of banana pudding.
I know. I know. I can't even imagine what she did and what she was thinking. I figured she thought somebody was playing a trick on her and it was just an accident.
I wonder if anybody saw it because I don't think they ever went there to sing again.
I know.
Oh,
I
Lord.
know.
I remember your daddy telling me a story. You know, him and his brothers, they were mischievous when they were boys.
You think?
Yeah. They were bad mischievous. He said there was an old man in their church that every Sunday he'd go to sleep and his head would lean back and his mouth would open wide open and he'd snore. And they slipped around and got some quinine tablets. Now, for those of you that don't know what quinine is, it's what they used to take for, in fact, you can still buy them. They're good for leg cramps and stuff. They're a tiny little pill, but they're extremely bitter, extremely bitter. Well, they eased up there and dropped one of those tablets in this man's mouth while he was asleep. And in a few minutes, when he woke up, they said he jumped up and he said, preacher, you're going to have to pray for me. I believe my gallbladder's done busted.
I remember Daddy telling that story. I do. I also remember him telling something. I don't know if I could get it straight, but I do remember a red wasp.
Yeah.
And they were talking about that. You may know about it more than I do.
They said there was a guy that was sitting in front of him and he went to sleep and he dropped his head down like this. And he said the back of his neck, he just looked like he just got a fresh haircut and the back of his neck was slick and shiny. and there was a red wasp crawling on the pew, and they grabbed it, caught it by the wings, and just reached up there and touched it to the back of his neck. It stung him. He said he liked to throw the pews up, trying to get away from
Man,
there.
my goodness.
Them boys were bad. They were bad.
They were rough.
But yeah, we've seen some funny stuff in churches, man. I know if you grew up in small churches, you've seen funny stuff too. But it's good to laugh.
Yeah,
Laughter's good medicine.
that's right.
It's I remember when I was a kid, um, and I was a teenager. That's when Dallas was big on TV, and the big thing right during that time was who shot Jr.
That's right.
That was the big thing. Everybody was waiting for this season finale so they could find out who shot Jr. And the brother Timmy, that same pastor I was talking about before that
With
spit his
the
teeth out. He was preaching and he said, everybody's worried about JR. He said, I don't know who shot JR and I don't care. And my cousin's little boy, he was about 5, jumped up on the pew and hollered, Sue Ellen shot him, blew his arm off. Oh, some funny stuff.
It is. I remember, Mark, I remember hearing a little bit of, Brother Gerald Crabb. He told a story. He said that he had always told his son, Jason Crabb, not to ever hand the microphone to somebody. If they're going to go out and have testimonies or anything like that, he said, don't hand the microphone to somebody.
Yeah,
He said, hold the microphone.
hold it.
So you
Yeah.
always have control.
Yeah.
And do you remember the story about that?
About the woman saying, "Oh, I just don't think
Yeah.
I'm going to make it," and just belly aching.
Yeah,
And
yeah, she just kept saying that she didn't think she was going to make it, but then she looked over there and there was a picture.
oh no
that
no 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 no! She said she was going through a rough time. She said, I think her husband had died or something. I don't remember. But she said, I just didn't want to get out of the bed. I was having a rough time. Nothing made me happy. She said, my children would come over and visit. That wouldn't make me happy. Um, my grandkids came by to visit. That didn't make me happy. Uh, Somebody brought a picture of Jesus and hung it on my wall right in front of my bed so I could see it. She said, that didn't make me happy.
She looked over there and saw that picture.
But then I looked over there and saw that picture of Vince Gill, and it just cheered me right up.
I know. Like,
That's
okay.
why you never give somebody the mic, because
Yeah.
you don't know what.
You
We
know,
used to have a lady in our church when I was growing up, and every time she stood up to testify, it was, "Oh, I'm just don't think I'm going to make it. Everything's bad." Just it was the same thing every time.
Yeah.
And you were always, and she just kept on. She'd go on and on and on and on. And I think that's why churches quit having testimony services, because of
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
she'd say, "Oh, the devil's been on my back this week. Bless his soul," or something
Bless
like
his
that.
sweet name.
Bless his sweet name. You're like, what?
Yeah, and you just wishing, oh, I wish she would sit down and be quiet, because it was the same thing every time.
Mhm. What about those times when you're standing there and, the person that can't sing at all is the one that sings the loudest
Oh
right
yeah,
there in your ear in
absolutely.
the choir?
Yeah, I remember when I was growing up in that church, we had a lady in our church couldn't carry a tune at all, and she always stood right behind me in the choir, and she sung louder than anybody. Bless her heart. She was a sweet lady. Everybody loved her to death. Yeah, bless her heart. Everybody loved her to death. She was just a powerful woman of God, but she could not sing, and she just sung loud. And I know it's about making a joyful noise, but my gosh, you don't have to do it that loud.
Can you make a quieter, joyful noise?
Yeah, you could hear her over everybody.
Hmm.
And it don't matter how good everybody else is singing. If she's drowning them out, that's all you can hear.
That's right. Well, there's been several times, and we were talking about the lady with the skirt or the dress, in the top of her hose. I remember we were at another church and standing in the choir. I was in the choir that time, and this lady came along and she had that same exact thing happen. The bottom of her dress was stuck up in the top of her pantyhose and came parading right across in front of the choir and going back to her seat, and it was It was something else. So
I-
I am so careful, and I try to watch.
I've seen them come in with toilet paper dragging behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Just all kind of funny stuff like that.
but it's so many funny things. You got anything else, Mark, that you can think of?
That's all I can think of at the moment.
I know. It's just if you go anywhere, there's going to be funny stuff that happens whenever you got people around. I love to go and people watch, but we just thought it'd be fun just to bring y'all some funny church stories that we've seen or that we've heard about. If y'all have got some funny church stories, then send them our way. And if you want to come on the podcast or, and you want to tell some stories or anything, shoot us a little message and let us know some stories, and we might put them together and ourselves if you don't want to join in and share them another time.
Yeah, we're looking for guests. If you got some funny stories or any kind of stories, it don't have to be funny. It can be inspirational stories. If you have stories you want to share, get in touch with us. We would love to have you on.
So we got some exciting guests. We just had a guest come on, and we've got some more guests that's lined up for y'all. So y'all be watching out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, send us a little message. We'd be glad to hear from y'all. It does encourage us when we get those messages from y'all. And we hope that you've enjoyed something that we've had to say today about funny church stories. So hope it gave you a little laugh.
Well, God bless y'all. Y'all join us next time on Tell Me That Story, and we'll see y'all later.
Bye-bye.